Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Rekha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And this is a very telling article, to say the least. And I want to highlight it as, it never fails, right? And we're seeing here the stage is now set. Now, as I read through this article, I'll get to the key point that I want to highlight here. But, this is exactly why we say what we say about the foot in the door, right? Sometimes it's not always about what everybody's eyes are on, but rather what that means for the future. And that's what seems to get people every time. So it says here, DHS head, cannibal, illegal, tried to eat himself on deportation flight. Now, you may think that, people here would never resort to such things. In fact, you may think you would never resort to such things, right? That's what a lot of people think until they're put in certain situations. And one thing that needs to be clear is it's practically impossible for you to experience something you've never experienced before. And I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but what I mean by that is what you imagine the situation to be like versus what it's actually like can be two completely different things. Okay. And I'm mainly talking about situations that involve, certain chemicals in your body being released that you don't even anticipate, right? Situations where, say, you find yourself in the midst of chaos. Chaos you may have mentally envisioned many times over. Your mental vision of it does not contain the adrenaline that's pumping through your body, right? Or the other hormones or chemicals that are being released at that point, right? The envision doesn't include how your sense of hearing gets altered, right? How your body starts actually shaking and you can't control it. And then how your brain is now borderline not working because there's so much information. It's like an information overload at once, right? So you don't get to experience those parts until you're actually put in that situation. And sometimes it's so overwhelming that people do a complete 180 of what they thought they would do or what they said they would do. Case in point, why the Lord said he would keep us, right? In Revelation 3 and 10, right? Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will keep thee in the hour of temptation. Now, if we had everything we needed, the Lord wouldn't need to keep us. Right. But it goes to show you that even in that time, with the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding we have now, we're still going to need an actual spirit, all right, of the Lord upon us that'll basically like keep you from going, from losing it, from becoming irrational with fear, with how bad things are going to get. Now, for the rest of the people out here, that's a whole different story. Right. So I'm going to read this here. It says Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem related a bizarre event to the media during the press conference for the new Alligator Alcatraz deportee holding facility, telling reporters that an illegal alien suspected to be a cannibal attempted to eat himself during a recent deportation flight. And in case you haven't observed, things are getting more spooky or more real by the day, right? You're literally looking at that, as it says in Revelation 13, that he spake as a dragon. You're seeing that transition in real time from a reign under somebody like Biden, where everything was just willy-nilly, to now you got Trump out here who he's basically showing it, right? Like when he comes on there and says, we might need to look at, or people might consider this, was it controversial? I think he said, but I couldn't care less. And then he goes on to make his point. He's basically telling you that whatever it is that he's there to accomplish, he's going to do that. And quite frankly, he can care less if he has to go down the route of dictatorship to do that. All right. So it says here, I think I read that part. Noem claims that U.S. Marshals deputies reported to her that the flight had to be halted before takeoff as the man caused serious self-harm and had to receive immediate medical treatment. And also, a lot of these cases that you'll see, a portion of them are demons, right? That jump on people to the extreme. Sometimes it's circumstances that get so dire, right? Like in the scriptures, during a famine, you had people, mothers eating their children, and so on. And sometimes it's spirits that actually jump on people to behave that way. But with all this going on, you're starting to see a divide as well, because you have people, whenever you start to see these illogical arguments or decisions, know that it's some plot for a narrative. Let's go back to the time of Biden, right? When you look at for a president of a country whose priority would be the national security, so to speak, right? You have all these agencies, FBI, CIA, and they're looking and watching people and making sure that no suspicious activities going on, so called, right? You have all these intelligence agencies, and yet you thought that the best course of action would be not only to open up the borders, right, to not defend it, but let anybody come into the country. Not only that, but you then try to fight against those that were saying, hey, let's actually close these borders. We can't allow anybody into the country. And then in addition, you funded, right? There was information that came out that the federal government funded non-government organizations to bring in people into the country. That goes beyond, oh, this is just a bad idea, or this guy doesn't know what he's doing. That spells they know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is the opposite of what you would think you would want to do. This tells you their goal was not national security, their goal was not your safety, their goal was an agenda. So that's like one example of, like blatantly irrational decisions that are being pushed for. The second thing is, now you're seeing these democratic states, right, where you have different mayors and different governors that are being asked, right, and being put on the hot seat and saying, hey, so you're signing legislations, you're signing executive orders, you're basically supporting cases where, and this isn't the case for every single one, but you're supporting cases where illegal immigrants come in, they commit heinous crimes, and then they're just let off, right? Instead of saying, hey, you got to get them out of here, which is what the opposing side is saying, right, as they're building these things like Alligator Alcatraz, you're saying, nah, it's fine, let them in. So they burn a woman on a train, right? That's fine, let them in. They go ahead raping people, killing people, so on and so forth. Once again, not the case for everybody, but in these in these scenarios where they have been highlighted, right, for these situations, that's basically what I'm pinpointing here. So now you think, hold on, how is it that it's like another blatantly irrational argument or decision here to say, nah, we're not gonna allow you to come and deport people, right, that have not been vetted and may have potential criminals amongst them. We're not gonna let you do that. Let them run wild. And as a matter of fact, give them more privilege than the actual citizens of the country or the state or wherever. You look at that, that's not that's a bad mistake, or oh, they don't know what they're doing. Once again, that is an example of they know exactly what they're doing, except what they have in mind is not your best interest. It's to play into the narrative. So don't be surprised where you have certain states or certain cities where it's just chaos, and then certain other states and certain other cities where they have those same, what they would call, because eventually they're going to start using those terms like dissidents, communists, socialists. They about to, I was reading an article earlier today on the same site, Zero Hedge, and they started using that terminology, right, in the see if I can find it here, but basically in this where they're trying to get the big beautiful bill to pass, tensions flared up, and now this is basically where they ended up at. Here we go. Buckle the F up. Trump world rages at GOP holdouts after tax bills stall in House. Here it is that they said it. Let me see here. Here we go. So it says here, top White House aide Stephen Miller, meanwhile, demanded that Republicans stand with Trump to show loyalty to the man who had been persecuted by the communist left. Hear that? So it's not the leftist or the far left or the extreme left. It's the communist left now. Once they start throwing those out there, once again, it's a desensitization tactic. So things are moving to that when you go into history, right? You look at like the Soviet Union, the as they call this guy Mao, they call it the Maoist communism or something like that, right? Those places weren't always like that, right? There was a process of transformation before that country became like that. It didn't happen overnight, right? And people don't study history enough to see those same signs and recognize them when they're happening again. They just think, oh, as long as right now doesn't look like the extreme version of communist Soviet Union or communist China or, some dystopian future, then we're fine. But those dystopian futures didn't happen overnight. They took the same steps and the same paths that you see happening now. And the people failing to realize and recognize, not that they could really do much about it, led to the same outcome. So anyway, get ready for them cannibals. Here we go. Especially when there's famines and food shortages. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. It says here, they said that they had detained a cannibal and put him on a plane to take him home. And while they had him in his seat, he started to eat himself, and they had to get him off and get him medical attention. Noam said during the briefing with President Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, keep in mind, right, that these scenarios, like this is like what they would call like the growing pains, right? Our goal is to clean up the country. Our goal is to get these dangerous people out the country. But in the process of doing that, we're finding out what works and what doesn't work. We're finding out that some of them are too dangerous to try and actually transport out of the country. So we need to actually put some of them in these holding centers, right? We're finding out that some of them need rehabilitation before they can actually be released anywhere. So put them in these holding centers. We're finding out that maybe this isn't enough, right? We're finding out that people are alerting them via these apps so that when ICE comes in, they can escape. So we need to now find more effective measures of finding people, tracking people, tracing people, and rounding them up. And we're also seeing that people are getting more and more violent, so we need to speed up our efforts in finding these people and yada, yada, yada. What do you think Palantir is here for? What do you think all this AI research and infrastructure build is here for? Especially when it's military themed or focused. So the signs are really all on the wall. And as it says here, so this guy, right, Nick Sorter says, WTF, Kristi Noem just revealed one of the illegals they arrested was a cannibal who began to eat himself on a deportation flight. This is why we need mass roundups. You hear that? And this is another tactic they use is setting up what they call agent tours, right, on both sides. So when they want to get the masses to believe a certain thing, or mob, they call them, right? They want to get the mob, they would use agent tours on both sides. An agent that looks like a regular person or has a large following or whatever, and this is basically the medium to the people. That's not the news. And they would come out and say one thing and say this, that, and the third, and we need to look at this and X, Y, and Z. And then you would have an agent on the other side who would say the opposite. Their job is to counter what is being said. And this is to get people on either side. And now, one, they know who believes what, who supports what. But two, they're still able to control the mob or the masses of the people and their mind. It's called like that hive mind. That's what they do, right? They get one or two or three, and then majority of people start to just go along with it. And that's why they use these terms to categorize people, right? when they say the far left or when they say the left or the Democrats, you may not agree with it, but just because you support the Democratic Party, you're going to go along with it. Anyway, these people are animals. So when they start throwing this sentiment out there, people start to be like, well, I never really, I mean, I wouldn't say they're animals, but I mean, shit, I mean, how do you defend a situation like that? And then, and what they do is they'll highlight, even if it's just one or two, they'll highlight these situations and make it look like that's what's happening all around. Let, let somebody, now it's like every criminal that gets caught is a legal immigrant, right? Let somebody get caught being an illegal immigrant, cannibalizing somebody else, not themselves, but somebody else in the U.S., right? Or some other heinous crime. And it's just going to go up more and more and more. Why? Because it builds the support to say, this is why we need more alligator Alcatraz. We need more harsh measures. We need more federal power because people are trying to combat ICE and so on and so forth. It's the same tactic they use again and again and again. These are the kind of deranged individuals that are on our streets in America that we're trying to target and get out of our country because they're so deranged they don't belong here. So once again, right, you have cases like this, and you have cases where you have others that are in the country and maybe they're just trying to work, right? But because of these kinds of situations being highlighted in the minds of others, it's just like painting with a broad brush. The DHS secretary further urged, they shouldn't be walking the streets with our children, and they shouldn't be, and that's called is it ethos? You have pathos, logos, and ethos. I think ethos is like when you appeal to the emotion, right? I think logos is more towards logic and so on. But whenever they start throwing children and wives and families, that triggers a certain part of your mind, right? Certain part of your brain. It's like a psychological hack. Because when you think of children, you think of vulnerability, right? You think of safety. You think of you need to protect, right? Whenever you hear, oh, he's just a child, then all of a sudden what they did is less of a big deal, right? Oh, it's a woman that was stuck over here. Oh no, it was a pregnant mother, and that's that psychological hack. It's similar to why when you go to a casino, they don't let you gamble with physical money. They'll give you those red chips, and those red chips, yeah, they're still money, but they're just in a different form. So your brain doesn't look at it as money. It's just, oh, I know what, maybe I throw in another one, and I throw in another two. Oh, let me go. I'm going all in, and before you realize it, you broke. But if you were putting down dollar bills, $20 bills, $100 bills, $50 bills, you'd be thinking twice about that. Right? It's all psychological hack. Anyway, it says here, and they shouldn't be living in the communities with our families who just want to raise their children to grow up and get a job and live the American dream, she added. Now, in all fairness, this is not really the case, right? not really, right? If you look at most of the so-called communities, they're not trying to actually just raise up their children to grow up, get a job, and live the American dream, right? They're also doing drugs and promoting wickedness and so on and so forth, and adultery and all that in their cities. But for the sake of the, obviously she's not going to say that, right? So for the sake of the point they're trying to make, once again, they're appealing to people. So Noam suggested, here's the main part. Noam suggested that the new alligator Alcatraz facility should be replicated in other states around the country. And there you go. And they asked Trump that. They said, is this going to be the new model going forward? And he said it might be, right? Or it could be. So this right here is they first coming with the idea, then they do it, and then now it's the model, right? Now it's like, hey, other states should have this. And then there may be pushback. They might be like, oh, no, I don't think we're going to go that extreme. And what happens when there's that pushback? All of a sudden, there's a surge in crazy crimes by illegals to the point where now it's like, well, now you see why we said you need this. So whether you call it a concentration camp, a FEMA camp, or alligator Alcatraz, it's doing basically the same thing. You're holding facilities or detention centers for people. And this is how it starts. Doesn't mean this is how it's going to end, right? Maybe you think, yeah, it's just a holding center. They throw your ass in there, you're not coming back out. They tell you, no, in order to come back out, we need to identify you, right? We need to implant you. We need to rehabilitate you so you go back a better citizen back into the country. I hope my phone rings off the hook from governors calling and saying, how can we do what Florida just did? How can we do exactly what they did? She emphasized. So if more certain states start implementing this, you're going to have people fleeing to other states that don't implement this. And then you start to have the division, right? Of you go to a certain part of the country, it looks like this. You go to another part of the country, it looks like this. Noam also urged that President Trump is upholding freedom by what he is doing, adding, I'm calling out you, CNN. I'm calling you out because you lie every single day about what these operations are. We're going after murderers and rapists and traffickers and drug dealers and getting them off the streets and getting them out of this country because Joe Biden let the worst of the worst come in, Noam asserted. Why? Why is nobody asking that? Why did he do that? Did he not, was it not common sense that you would end up in a situation like this if he did that? So he just, with all his counsel and so on and so forth, everybody just thought, you know what, what's the worst that could happen, right? Go on and let them on in, right? Knowing what countries they're coming from, having reports that you have potential dangers in here, still go on and let them in. And it just so happens that it lays the perfect red carpet for Trump to come in and do and push his campaign here. Interesting. Anyway, this is the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath. And that's that key part right there, right? Because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. So they're moving quick, and they're going to keep moving quicker because we're already in 2025, right? So they have an agenda. They have a plan that they're trying to implement. They need chaos, right? They need scenarios, narratives, situations, crises, so they can fix it with their plan. And that's what we're getting ready to witness. So anyway, with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying and exhorting, or really more informative, but also exhorting to the elect, right? As this is signs of what Yahushua prophesied onto us, and really signs that we're closer to the kingdom. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kudash. And until next time, Shalom.